You know you're gonna see the best of worst with the shit flick critic. You know you're gonna see shit that's absurd with the shit flick critic. From Pandemic the Room, Samurai Cop, Troll 2, Man, Sense of Fate, Miami Connection 2. So come along, see the worst with me. I'm the shit flick critic, self-isolation edition. Hello everyone, my name's Andrew Lewis and welcome to my self-isolating edition of the Shit Flick Critic. And for those of you who don't know, this is just a really kind of informal vlog style series, given that I am self-isolating in Blackpool. These are going to be very unpolished, just sort of reviews of terrible things that I've seen during my time in isolation. And today's episode, and I want to give a special thanks to Marcus Aurelius for giving this idea. It is the wonderful film known as Raw, and you can see the tagline there is a ferocious comedy, which is, I feel, a little bit misleading. It wasn't necessarily a comedy, and just so you guys know, it looks like I can draw cars a lot better than I can draw tigers, because you know, that tiger there, I've definitely seen better. But anyway, so let's talk about Raw. So Raw is a movie that was made. It was actually made over production started in 1970, I believe. It was directed by a gentleman called Noel Marshall, and it was produced by Noel Marshall and his wife Tippi Hedren, who's a well-known actress that was in the movie Birds. Both of them are very passionate big cat enthusiasts, and they actually met during the filming of a film known as Satan's Harvest. They met in Africa, and while they were both, I think she was acting in it, this film Satan's Harvest, they witnessed during some very severe poaching that was going on in Africa, a bunch of lions decided to take refuge in an abandoned house, and Tippi Hedren and Noel Marshall witnessed this, and they were like, oh, isn't that funny? Like, those cats are just walking around this house like it's theirs. Wouldn't it be funny if we made a movie that centers around a bunch of lions being in a house? And I don't know if that's when they got married, but they did get married at one point and decided to produce this movie. And production actually began in the early 70s, and it took 11 years to complete. And 4 years of that was the actual filming itself, which apparently was just notorious for just being very, very, probably the most, if this movie is considered a horror, that would be the most horrendous part of this whole film, because they sort of dealt with floods, fires, death of lions, and the most notorious part of this film is the fact that 70 people were injured during its production, because this whole film basically, it involves 150 untamed big cats, lions, tigers, I think there's some leopards and stuff, so leopards, cheetahs, so all of those 150 plus the cast and crew. And I believe, so Noel Marshall, who plays the lead character of, what's his name, Hank, he was the most frequently injured. Apparently he was so frequently injured that he basically ended up getting gangrene from always having wounds from these giant tigers. And the director of cinematography for the film actually ended up having the back of his head bitten, and his scalp was hanging off, and it had to be sewed back on. But he actually ended up coming back to the film to finish off all of his shots, which is a very tremendous effort on his behalf. What else can I say about its production? So it had a budget of $17 million, and actually $4 million of that was simply recovering from a lot of these natural events that halted production, like the floods and stuff. Because during the floods, a sheriff actually came and with some other police officers and ended up shooting 3 of their lions, and a bunch of other lions died during the flood. One of them was actually the main lion of the film, even though it's kind of hard to tell that it was replaced. So that was killed. So yeah, that sucked up a lot of the budget for the film. So the film cost $17 million to make, and it only made $2 million back, with a net loss of 15 big ones. So Yeah, not a very great investment. Noel Marshall seems to think that the film actually made more than that, but I don't know. Looking at the sales and stuff, I don't actually think they were allowed to show it in America, but it was shown in Japan and Germany, where it seemed to have mild success. So I don't know. I think 2 million is probably around what it would have made. Probably because it's just a bizarre film. It's very strange. So let's go through the plot. So it follows the story of this Hank, who's played by Noel Marshall, who again also produced and directed the film. He didn't have any acting experience when he decided to play the lead role in this film, and he is a naturalist, or someone very passionate about nature, living in this hut, and he's basically surrounded by lions and tigers. And it was actually filmed in California, which is interesting too, because you'd think that, given the sheer amount of lions and stuff, that it was filmed in Africa, and that's where indeed the actual film takes place. But no, it was actually filmed in California, which is very surprising. I don't know where they got their hands on 150 big cats for the filming of this, but they managed to. And so he's this naturalist living in this hut surrounded by lions who like him. And even though they fight each other and they seem to attack him quite frequently, they're actually nice animals. And at the beginning of the movie, a bunch of poachers or just bad men come to tell him, you shouldn't have all these lions. And he's like, no, my lions are really safe. And then they all proceed to be mauled by these lions. They didn't actually die, they just get severely injured. But I find that very ironic, because the main point of this film, I imagine, was to let the world know how safe lions were, despite the fact that multiple times during the film and during the film's filming process, a lot of people actually did get mauled by tigers. So then they go away, and then I can't remember why, but the main character decides to go on this trip with his friend, but he forgot about his family coming to visit him from America. So his family comes, and they end up coming to his cabin while he's not there, not knowing about the 150 big animals that are surrounding it. So basically, the plot of the film, it's imagine like Home Alone, but with lions and tigers. So that's really it. It's just his family coming. So it's his wife, played by Tippi Hedren, his two sons, which are actually his two sons, because they didn't want any real actors being harmed in this film. So all of the cast members are actually family members of Tippi Hedren and Noel Marshall. So and they all actually have their real names. So we've got John Marshall, Jerry Marshall is the two brothers, with Melanie Griffith, who is Tippi Hedren's daughter, playing one of the sisters. And it's actually very obvious that that character is played by two actresses, because at the beginning of the film, for about the first half, you can tell it's this one actress, which I believe, my theory is, because then it changes at some point, I think the actress in the second half was Tippi Hedren's daughter, and I think the actress in the first half was apparently her childhood friend, because Melanie Griffith didn't want to be involved in the production because she witnessed two lions fighting, and that scared her. So she ducked out, and her childhood friend replaced her. But then at one point, Melanie Griffith saw how friendly these lions were, and she came in. So yeah, at one point you can tell that the actress just completely turns into a different person. And it's really just them. It's a very repetitive movie. It's just them in this house going, ooh, 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 for ages. And what's the tone of this movie is strange too, because at the beginning of the family's encounter with all these cats, it starts off very horrific, like a straightforward horror film. They're like, they're stuck in these rooms, and these lions are trying to break through and attack them, and the music reflects this really kind of horrific environment. And then just at one point, it turns, the soundtrack kind of goes like, doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo, and they're like, ooh, ooh, and I think each character falls into water, because this house is surrounded by a lake, falls into water probably twice each. So you get very sick of seeing this family in slow motion fall into water. But so the tone completely changes at one point. And in terms of acting, the acting's just terrible. I mean, all of it. It's really bland. Considering this family thinks that they're going to be mauled by a pride of lions, they don't seem very, very worried about it. Even like some of the dialogue is like, oh no, don't let that lion in, it may maul us. especially the sons. The sons are particularly bad at acting. And it should be mentioned too, I think Jerry Marshall, the youngest, he kind of looks like if Shaggy and what's her name? Oh, I can't remember that character name. Whatever the character's name from Scooby Doo with the, no, it's not coming to me. Someone say it in the comments. But she wears orange and she's got glasses. But it looks like if they had a baby, because he looks like Shaggy with, and I almost imagine him at one point going, oh geez, there's lions outside. Oh, Scoob, look at all those lions. Because it's just them running around this house. It almost needed that corridor scene from Scooby Doo, where it's like they leave one door, a lion leaves with them, a lion comes out this door, and and then they're chasing a lion. That's what this film needs, because it gets very silly at one point. Meanwhile, you've got the parallel action going on in this film is Noel Marshall's character Hank trying to get home because at one point he learns that his family is back at his place, and he needs to go and let them know that these lions aren't actually don't have any malicious intentions. They just want to play. So, and this character Hank has no indoor voice. He's just yelling the whole movie about everything that's going on, and you need to watch out for these lions, and I'm going to protect these lions. There's even actually a scene earlier on in the film. There's two lions fighting each other, and he tries to break this fight up. I don't know why, because you should probably just let lions do whatever they need to do. I don't see why he had to do that. And you can see while he's trying to break up this fight, the actual actor, Noel Marshall, gets bitten by a lion. And you see him and he's going like that, and there's all blood all over his hand. And he did actually get bit in that scene. So, yeah, and he's just screaming all the time. So he's trying to get home to let them know that these lions aren't going to kill them, which is one of the biggest faults in this movie, is the foregone conclusion that we, the audience, know that these lions aren't going to eat them. So it kind of ruins a lot of the tension when we know that it'd be like, imagine if in the movie Halloween, at the very beginning of the movie, a doctor says, now I just want to let everyone know that this character, what's his name? Michael Myers, I think he's in Halloween. He just wants to be friends with everyone he meets. He doesn't actually want to kill anyone. So then for the rest of the movie, when he's going into people's houses and people are screaming, we'd just be thinking, well, he just wants to be friends with them. And that would suck all the tension out, which is exactly what happened with this film, because it takes the family so long to figure out that these lions don't want to eat them. There's even one scene when they're all in a kitchen and the lions are just chilling out with them, and none of them seem that panicked. They're just kind of talking very nicely. And at that point, you're like, oh, they're finally realizing that these lions don't want to eat them. And then the next scene, they're back to screaming about these freaking lions. And it goes on for so long. Most of the movie is just them hiding in various objects, and then these objects fall over, and then they can't get out, and then they hide in a barrel, and then the barrel gets broken, and it just goes on and on and on. And then there's a funny line at the end when they all fall asleep in this hut because they're so tired from trying to get away from these lions. And they leave the door open for some reason, even though it's like 40 feet less than away from the other house. They go in this hut, they start sleeping. All the lions come in and sleep with them. And the girl wakes up and goes, oh, I guess they didn't want to hurt us after all, because they would have just eaten us in our sleep. Which is a very dark line for what's considered to be a comedic movie. So, it's just a lot of the same thing. And I got bored very quickly. I really wanted to skip through the last half of this movie, because at one point you're like, yes, the lions are going to follow them around this house, and they're going to go, ooh, 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 ah, ooh, ooh, ooh. So it's very repetitive. I mean, the one saving grace about this movie is it really does make you uncomfortable, because you are actually witnessing people being pursued by actual lions, so it made me not fear for the characters. It made me fear for the actors themselves. So in that sense, for a lot of this movie, I was actually kind of worried for their safety, and indeed a lot of them did actually get attacked, so that safety was probably, my concerns were probably warranted. But what else is there to talk about? Let me just look at my little notes I got around here. I wrote some notes down while I was doing it, because I feel like that's one thing that happened in it that I was particularly annoyed about is in the opening scenes when the family first arrives in Africa, they do something that movies do sometimes, and it drives me up the bloody wall. And that's I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with exposition, but exposition is a way of telling the audience something that they need to know in order to make the plot work. A lot of movies do it very subtly. The worst way to do it is what they do in this movie, when it's got all of the family sitting in a car and the mother says to the daughter, well, as you know, I left my husband 4 years ago and it hasn't been working since then. So that's why we're in Africa, to go and see him, to see if I still love him. It's like, don't do it like that. Do it subtly. Like, don't literally just spoon feed the audience all the information that they need to know. That drives it always starts with either, as you know, you may very well know, or my favorite, I don't have to tell you that I love your father very much and now he lives with lions. So yeah, very lazy script writing, not very funny. The movie is said to be an adventure horror comedy. I don't even know what it is. I don't really know what this movie's about. I don't know why it was made. It's all over the place. The tone, the storyline. It's boring for a lot of it because I know that no one's going to die. The only characters that do die are the obviously evil characters, so there's no real loss factor there. Yeah, no one good dies because it's this family. I must admit, the one thing I really did like about watching this film was I've never seen lions up so close before, and I've never seen so many lions in one place. And it is interesting to see that they are basically just these big house cats. So that in itself was quite fascinating to see. So I did get a little bit out of this film. And I'm not going to say that it's the worst film I've ever seen. It just misses the mark of what it was supposed to do. Especially when the point of the movie is about, look at these lions and how safe they are. And so many people got attacked during production and people get attacked during the movie that it didn't really end up sending that message. And even actually, I was reading that Tippi Hedren actually regretted producing the movie because she felt that a lot of the animals were treated cruelly by her husband, Noel Marshall. So she in fact regrets the production. So I believe that's really it that I need to say about the movie. So let's do the rating, shall we? Because the rating is something that I happen to do when I'm reviewing a film. So we'll talk about laughability. I did kind of laugh during this film. I mean, it's supposed to be a comedy, but I didn't laugh at the moments. In terms of the stupidity, sometimes I giggled and stuff, but it wasn't like, I wasn't like roaring with laughter. I was just kind of like, isn't that silly? But nothing too extravagant. Rewatchability, probably never again. It's pretty boring. Yeah, I think once is enough. I'm glad I saw it, but it's very boring. The pace, yeah, man, this thing just goes on and on and on and on. You just get so sick of seeing this family go, ooh, and the other character trying to get home, and even just like, you'll get sick of seeing like lions just mildly attacking people, and Noel Marshall, you'll get sick of seeing him tackle them and try and tame them, and yeah, it's just very repetitive. Production value. I mean, it was filmed pretty well. Apparently they had 6 cameras going at the same time, which is impressive. Looks like there was a lot of money that went into it. It's a shame they didn't put money into actually getting proper actors, but then they didn't want the liability of having an actual actor mauled, so I understand that. But yeah, not the worst part of this film. And the intention, I mean, they made it because they wanted to protect lions and tigers and stuff. And they wanted to show the world that they're not these awful creatures that everyone makes them out to be. And I must admit, they achieved that, because I was very surprised at how serene a lot of these animals were. So it was an education for me in because the moment the movie starts and you see like at least like 30 lions off the bat, you're like, they are going to kill everyone in sight. And when the main character starts interacting with these things, I'm thinking, how is he not just being immediately mauled? But it did go to show that they're actually quite sweet. And as I said, a lot of them are just like big house cats. So if that was what it set out to do, I must admit that it achieved that. So therefore, I give this movie -3 stars. It's worth a watch, and it's not that bad. It's just the plot, the tone, and the acting. But everything else about it I found rather enjoyable. So yes, Raw. So thank you for that. And you've now Now that you've reached the end of my video, you are eligible to hear a travel story of something that happened to me while I was away. So let me just go through my mind's eye, because I've told a few now. What about, let's talk about in Mexico. This is funny. So I liked being in Mexico, I really did, but it was very noisy. It's a very noisy environment, and I guess the Mexicans are used to it because they're around it all the time, but I find it quite irritating. And we were in a hotel in a place called, Tepaji in, I forgot the state, but anyway, so we're in this hotel, and this dude on this little cart that he was selling stuff on, he had a speaker, and the speaker was going, "E toro preparo niños y pasos, tarina tokoro keteli ninanos, hado," and it was just doing that non-stop. And he had his little cart parked right in front of our hotel. And normally, I'd heard it before, but normally they just rode around the town. So like, even if you got annoyed, they were never anywhere close enough for long enough for you to get super agitated. But this dude was parked out the front of our hotel, and I got really, really annoyed because, you know, we paid money to be in this hotel. So it was just very inconsiderate. So I ended up going out, and I was like, disculpe. And he looked at me, I was like, alto, is muy demasiado, I forgot what loud was, but I was just trying to communicate to him. I was like, you know, it's annoying. And he turns it down, and then I walk back inside, and he just turns it up again. So I got really angry, and I went out to him, and I was just like, move, like, go. And he wasn't directly in front of the hotel, but after I told him to move, he rode directly in front of where our room was and then turned it up. And I went outside, and I got very angry, and I was yelling some pretty powerful words at him, because at that point he was just doing it to spite me, which upset me. And he just didn't care. He turned it down while I was talking, and then I went back in, and he just turned it up again. So then he went back to his original spot next to where there was a supermarket, and I was inside, and I was like, his little sound system was quite shoddy. So I just felt like walking out and just pulling all the wires out, and I thought, no, I'm not going to get angry, and I'm not going to damage property. So I thought, what can I do? So I grabbed my guitar, and I went out, and I stood directly next to where he was, where his speaker was going, and I just started playing music as loud as I could right next to him to completely drown out his little speaker. So while the was going, I was just playing like, well, I'm a running around Lord trying to loot, just as loud as I could. And people were coming up and filming me on their phones, and like people were giving me money, and everyone was like super, super entertained by my playing, because I busked all around, you know, North America at that point. So I was pretty comfortable playing in public. And I just played and played and played and got money. And eventually he got sick of it, and he just rode away. And it was like, what a positive outcome to that. So yeah, that was funny. And I ended up making a bit of money. So it was great. And that thus concludes my video. So thank you so much for getting this far. If any of you have any other ideas, I'm really open, because again, I'm saving all the really best bad movies for when I start making my original videos again. So if any of you have just something for me to watch while I'm self-isolating, please let me know. Other than that, please do all the subscribing stuff, and, you know, send my video to someone if you got a kick out of it. I'm just going to keep making these as often as I can. So thus concludes the video. Thank you very much, and I will see you off with a little sing-song. You know you're gonna see the best, the worst with the shit flick critic. You know you're gonna see shit that's absurd with the shit flick critic. From pandemic the room, samurai control to mental sense of fate, my connection to. So come along, see the worst with me. I'm the shit flick critic. Thank you.